Today we are going to be reviewing renewable and non-renewable resources. Go ahead and open up your Earth Science Review packet to page number 5. Let's first start by watching this video clip really quick. While the video clip is playing, I want you to look for examples of renewable and non-renewable energy.
Daffodils, I love the fireside when the lights glow. Boom-de-yada, 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 boom. I love the ocean, I love the open sea, I love the forest, I love the bummer place, I love the stars above when night turns into day. Boom-de-yada, 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 boom. I love the sunshine, I love the butterflies, I love the wind blow, I love the river flow, I love the city lights when the moon is high. I love the daisies, I love the sugar beets, I love the meadows, I love the summer breeze, I love to walk on by my head up in the sky. Boom-de-yada, 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 boom-de-yada,
So let's talk about this. Before we can start talking about renewable and non-renewable resources, let's talk about what are natural resources. This you need to write in your note-taking packet. Natural resources are anything that occur naturally in the environment and are used by people. So examples of things that would be natural resources would be organisms, water, sunlight, minerals, oil, wind. However, one thing that we need to keep in mind is these resources are not equally available to all parts of the world. So if you look at this bottom image, this image is in Sierra Leone. And you can see here that they actually access their water through a central pump. So unlike in our houses where you have water coming in through a sink or in your bathroom, theirs is only in one area and they must walk there in order to obtain water for their cooking or sanitary needs. Now look here, this image comes from China. And you can see here that these blocks back here, these are actually pieces of coal. In China, coal is delivered to homes by bicycles in order to be burned for heat. And here, this is in Alaska, this is actually Iceland. In Iceland, it's called the land of fire and ice because underneath the ground there's a ton of geothermal energy and they actually use that heat from within the earth in order to heat their homes. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the ideas that different areas around the world use energy in different ways and have different amounts of access to it. When we talk about how we are using resources to meet our needs, we also need to look at how we might be producing waste. An ecological footprint is the amount of land and water that individuals use to meet their resource needs and absorb that waste they produce. Look at the chart below. This right here is showing you different countries, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Mexico, and China. Notice it is telling you the amount of ecological footprint per person, and then looking at the entire ecological footprint of the entire country. So, which country has the largest ecological footprint? And how many times larger is the average person's ecological footprint in the United States than a person in Mexico? Let's first look at question 1. Notice that the United States, we don't have one of the largest populations in the world. However, we do have one of the largest ecological footprints. That's because each person has an ecological footprint of 9.6. Now this kind of becomes startling if you look at a country's total ecological footprint. This aligns with question number 3. Do you notice how China, each person has a much smaller ecological footprint, but yet we can see here that China is coming in a close second when it comes to the United States. Why is this? This is because China has many more people than the United States has. Let's look at this, sustainable use. Please define sustainable use in your note-taking packet. Sustainable use is actually looking at the means in which we use resources, and at the rate which we're using them, how long will we have them for? How long a resource lasts depends on how frequently we're using it or wasting it. Policymakers and lawmakers have a very difficult time defining sustainable use for a resource. They can't seem to agree on how much of a resource is available and how long that resource should last based off of our current needs. This is why the use of renewable and non-renewable resources is so important to us. Let's look now at non-renewable resources. Please define and write examples of non-renewable resources in the bottom of your note-taking packet. Non-renewable resources are resources that are limited and cannot be replaced within our lifetime. Examples of non-renewable resources would be things like fossil fuels, so oil, coal, natural gas, metals, and minerals. Renewable resources, though, renewable resources can be managed or replaced in our lifetime. So examples of this would be things like wind energy, sunlight, water, trees, biomass, geothermal, and animals. Which of these resources could be considered non-renewable if they are consumed faster than they can be replaced? If you said things like trees, you would be correct. Let's look at an example of geothermal energy. Remember when we talked about energy conversion earlier and how we talked about how energy is converted from one form to another? So you might have chemical energy and fuels being converted into heat energy, which is then converted into mechanical energy, which is then converted into magnetic, and then electric energy. Well, what if we took the fuel out? What if we took out things like coal and fossil fuels and we replaced them with the Earth's heat? This is an example of geothermal energy. So you can see that we have heat that we are taking or harnessing from inside the earth. That heat from inside the earth is actually heating up the water, creating steam, and then now the process goes back to what we already looked at earlier in the week, which is that steam is siphoned off through tubes. The steam then turns turbines, so think of like a windmill, that's spinning. The spinning of the turbine actually spins a coil of wires in between a magnet, which then excites electrons and creates electricity. There's a lot of different ways we can get these turbines to spin. We can do it through geothermal energy. We could do it through the use of wind. We could do it through the use of water. Anything that can make these turbines spin could then induce an electrical current in a wire. So let's review quickly the different forms of non-renewable, renewable, and inexhaustible resources. Look at the options below. How would you sort these? What would minerals be? You said non-renewable. What would animals be? What would oil be? What would water be? What would fossil fuels be? And the sun? And coal? And trees? And natural gas? And corn? And wind? Let's check our answers. Tomorrow we will talk more about renewable and non-renewable resources.